On the bottom of Kuf Ches Amud Aleph, the Gemara raises a suffix about Ben Eitzel Aviv. Does the son require Heseiba in the presence at the table of his father? And the Gemara comes to the conclusion that a Ben is chayv in Heseiba even in the presence of his father. Then the Gemara raises a question about a Talmud in the presence of his Rebbe. And the Gemara tells various stories. Abaye, that when they were at Rabba's house, they did a Heseiba, even though he was their Rebbe. Then after Rabba's passing, Rabbi Yosef became the Rosh Hashiva, and Rabbi Yosef told them, he instructed them that they don't need a Heseiba. Mora Rabcha Kemora Shamayim. So if you look in the Rashbam says, Ben Eitzel Aviv, Tzorech Heseiba, to lo avi kofuf kol kach. He's not so kofuf. And then the Rashbam writes on the words of Rav Yosef, Mora Rabcha K'mor Shamayim, T'chsiv es Hashem Elokecha Tira leRabos Talmidei Chachamim, Hishva Mora Rabo leMora Shamayim. So the halach of Mora with regard to a Rebbe is equated to the reverence and the fear that we have to have for Shamayim. Mora Rabo Kimora Shamayim. Hi, Don. Hi, I'm sorry, I started a little late. I saw you, but then you...
Yeah, I saw you. You were teaching a totally different subject.
No, my previous year went overtime because we started late because of Rosh Chodesh, but if you want to join us now, I mean, it's up to you. Okay, bye-bye. Okay. So we have the Rashbam, and the Rashbam is saying that the reason why Ben is obligated in Heseiba, in the presence of his father, is simply because the Mora, the Kafuf, he calls it, is not Kol Kach. It's not such a profound Kafuf. So what we want to analyze the following, and then we'll continue in the Gemara Mirz Hashem. We want to understand what's the difference, according to the Rashbam, between an Isha, a married woman, in the presence of her husband, and the Gemara says that unless she's an Isha Chashuva, then she's not obligated in Heseiba because she's kafuf. So again, if I had a whiteboard, I would write on it kafuf. Chaf, pei, vav, pei. Kafuf. Subservient, I guess you'd call it. So is there anyone here who's willing to say that his wife is subservient to him? So for that, the answer is Isha Chashuva. Our wives are begetter Isha Chashuva. Okay. But this idea of Kafuf, L'chora, should apply to the case of a son who's in the presence of his father. The Gemara says that a woman who's married in the presence of her husband does not do a Heseiba. But the Gemara establishes that a son in the presence of his father does Heseiba. So even though in the case of a wife, we apply that rule that I mentioned before called kafuf, again, if you could do me a favor, I know I'm really going out on a limb here, but if you could take a pen and a piece of paper, just write the word kafuf, so I know that I could use that word over and over again. Right? Kafuf means subservient. But in the case of a son, he's obligated in Heseiba, and the Rashbam writes, She'eno kafuf kol kach. Kol kach means not so much. He's not so kafuf. I mean, he's admitting, the Rashbam, that a ben is kafuf to his father. In some sense, he is subservient, but it's not the same level of kafuf as the case of a wife in the presence of her husband. And the answer, and the nafkamina, the implication is that a woman in the presence of her husband does not do a seva because she's kafuf. But in the case of a son in the presence of his father, eino kafuf kol kach. He's kafuf, but not so kafuf. How do we explain that? Very vague. What's the difference between the kafuf of a married woman vis-a-vis a husband and the kafuf of a son vis-a-vis his father? Where's there a difference? Now, to make sense out of this, we have to add another comment to the Rashbam. The Rashbam says that Isha, on the Gemara says Isha ain't tzricha Heseiba, she doesn't need a Heseiba. Says the Rashbam, mipnei emas baila ukfufalo. So that concept of kafuf in the case of a married woman comes in at the end of the Rashbam. But at the beginning of the Rashbam, he says something totally different. Emas baila, which the best translation I can give to that in English is the reverence or the respect that she has vis-a-vis her husband. So again, we have now in the Rashbam two different concepts. We have a concept called kafuf that we spoke about, and now we have a concept called ema. Ema, aleph, yud, mem, aleph, meaning, again, for lack of a better word, reverence. So that basically the Rashbam, in his commentary, is adding A plus B equals C. Well, 1 plus 1 equals 2. He's combining two different reasons, two different explanations as to why a married woman does not do a Heseiba at the table of her husband. One is because of Ema, and the other is because of Kafuf. What's the difference between the two? Where does Ema begin and end, and where does Kafuf take over and begin and end? So I have in front of me the Amudei Hod, and he says a chiddush. He says that these are two different concepts. Ema and Kafuf are on two different radar screens. Ema, he says, is etzem hayira. It's the yira itself, the respect, the honor, the reverence in and of itself. Kafuf is something totally different. Kafuf, he says, is a financial obligation which is generated by the ksuba of malacha. Malacha means that whatever earnings a woman has, let's take, for example, in the old days, women very often would, what's the word, weave? You know those quilts? What's that called? Weaving? Do you weave a quilt? Did I get that right? Yeah. If not, we'll just, for our purposes, we'll borrow that word weaving. I think there's a better word than weaving. I don't know. Anyway, so let's say she has to do these malachos, she sells them on the open market, and the monies that accrue go to whom? Go to her husband. And that's what we call a quid pro quo relationship in the ksuba, because the husband has to support his wife. That's called mizonos. And she has to do these malachos and bring in some bread, so to speak, proverbial bread into the marriage, into the family. Or alternatively, if she has to clean the house, make sure everything is in order, she has to prepare the food. I mean, she could have hired herself out and made money and wages, but no, there's a financial responsibility of malacha within the framework of a ksuba in the marriage, and she cannot shirk that responsibility. That's called kafuf. Now let's take these two concepts and see how they apply or don't apply to the case of a son vis-a-vis his father. The first concept we said was etzem hayira. What do you say, Rabbi Osai? Yes or no? Yes. What do you say, Don? Is the yira of a son vis-a-vis his father? The Torah says, ish imo the aviv tiro. That's a pasuk in Chumash. I can't change that text. A son is obligated in the reverence of his father. So as far as ema, as far as yira, which is reverence, there's no difference between a wife vis-a-vis a husband and a son vis-a-vis his father. In fact, I would even add a kal v'chomer to boot. The reverence of a wife vis-a-vis a husband is low ebb. But the yira, the mora of a son vis-a-vis his father is high flame. It's doraisa, and it means he's not allowed to sit in his father's seat, and he's not allowed to contradict his father, and he can't create any sort of disrespect vis-a-vis his father. So from the perspective of yira, what he calls etzem hayira, then there's no difference between the between the son and the wife. However, now we get to the other concept, which is called what? Kafuf. Now, with regard to kafuf, we said that within the framework of a ksuba, the wife has financial responsibilities vis-a-vis her husband, and that's called kafuf. And now the question arises, does the son have financial responsibilities towards his father? So, for example, if my father says, I need you, you're in Chicago, I'm in New York, I need you, my dear son, to get on an Amtrak. How long does it take? Probably 2 days. I don't know how long it takes to get from Chicago to New York by train. Let's say a day. I don't know. Maybe I'm exaggerating. Probably a day. Steve, can you either support that or reject it?
It's at least a day, if not two.
It's at least a day.
No. I went from New York to Chicago. It's like 8-10 hours.
Oh, you went on the express train.
Overnight, express train overnight, yeah.
Oh, I see. That's the Amtrak Express train.
Yeah.
Probably costs more than a plane.
You get a sleeper, you sleep up.
Yeah. I don't know, it's hard for me to sleep on a train, but yeah. Okay.
My wife refused to fly, so that's the way we travel.
Oh, very good.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, how much does a ticket cost from New York to Chicago?
We're talking 50 years ago, so it's
50.
quite a while ago. Yeah.
I'm going to guess it's about $200. Am I exaggerating?
Probably, I don't know.
Just for the sake of our discussion. So my father wants me to get on a train and spend $200 and end up in Chicago to serve him, to help him. Like the Gemara says in Kiddushin, lachilo, lashkoso, lachniso, lotzio, put a blanket over him, whatever he is. My father needs me to serve him and take care of it, help him with his needs. Now, first of all, I have to pay for the ticket. So that's an expense. Secondly, I might have to lose a day or two of work. And they'll dock me from salary. That's also an expense. So within the framework of Mora Aviv, is there a halach of kafuf? What do I mean? Do I have to spend all this money out of pocket for the sake of kibbud av, or I can bill him? I could say, Dad, I'm willing to come from New York to Chicago, but you have to cover my expenses, my expenditures, and also my losses. So if we assume the latter possibility, meaning I have a right to say to my father, okay, I'll get on a train, but you have to pay the bill for that. I'm not going to take a loss for that. That's your responsibility. I'll do the physical service and serve you, but I don't have any financial responsibility to take a loss in that context. Then we can understand this Rashbam. Why? Because there's a difference between a married woman vis-a-vis her husband. She's not only got yira, but she also has kafuf, which means the financial obligation to bring in the money. But in the case of a son, he's got yira for sure. He's obligated in Mora Aviv in reverence for his father, but he doesn't have that financial kafuf. So that if the Rashbam means that the reason why we alleviate a married woman from Heseiba is because of A plus B, because of the overlap of those two reasons, namely Yira plus Kafuf, then in the case of Ben Eitzel Aviv, you only have one of those two. You only have Yira, but you don't have Kafuf. But all this, my friends, is based on the premise that I have a right to bill my father, and he has to cover the expenses for kibbud av. But the Gemara in Kiddushin has another opinion. And the Gemara quotes a debate about this very issue. And according to one opinion, kibbud av mishal ben. Mishal ben means that the ben has to sign on the check. He has to take the money out of his bank account and suffer the financial losses in order to fulfill the mitzvah of honoring his father. Which means that the ben Eitzel Aviv is not just Mora, but it's also Kafuf. And that means that just like a wife has a financial responsibility of malacha vis-a-vis her husband, so too a ben has a financial obligation of sherus, of serving his father and shelling out any monies and any payments that are necessary. So, for example, my father asked me for a steak. He's a Burzon. Burzons love steak, right? So a steak costs what, 100 shekel, 150 shekel? I don't know what they charge today for a steak in a restaurant. Okay, I'm going to order a steak for my father, be makayim the mitzvah of kibbud av. Who's got to pay the bill? And if we hold kibbud av mishal ben, then the son has to pay the bill. So that means that kibbud av has in it kafuf. It has a financial responsibility. I don't know how far you would go with this. I mean, because, let's say it takes a certain sum of money to support someone for a year. Let's say an annual support. Let's say it's $50,000, right? So does the son, if the father's doesn't have Social Security or he doesn't have pension plans and retirement policies, then does that mean the son is going to have to earn an extra $50,000 annually in order to support his father? I think the answer is yes, according to that opinion. I think we paskin halacha that kibbud av is mishel av, and the father has to pay the bill. But let's go according to that man the Omer. That man the Omer says that mishel ben, the ben has to take all the finances on his shoulders in order to be makayim the mitzvah of honoring his father. And in that sense, we can equate a ben etzel aviv to isha etzel baila. In both cases, that of a wife and that of a son, there's a double obligation. Number one, etzem ayira, and number two, kafuf. Because we're going according to that mandiyoma that says kibbut ab mishal ben. That's not good. Not good news. The Gemara says that a ben etzel aviv is chayiv in Heseiba. So what now is the difference between a ben etzel aviv who's chayiv in Heseiba and an isha etzel baila who's not chayiv in Heseiba? If both of the reasons of isha, A plus B, apply even in the case of a ben. Just let me know if you're following me at all. Am I, sometimes because of the Zoom, it's like I feel like I'm talking to the wall. I don't know. I don't know if you're following me. Should I repeat it or?
No, I'm good.
Steve, you're okay. What about you, Don? Are you following what I'm saying? We're looking, wherein is the difference between a ben etzel aviv and isha etzel baila? The Gemara establishes that isha etzel baila, she's exempt from Heseiba, and ben etzel aviv is chayav in Heseiba. Why? Both reasons that apply to isha will apply to the ben, according to that mandiyomar who says that kibbut ab mishal ben, and the ben has to shell out from his pocket in order to serve his father. So I want to read to you one line in the Amudei Hod. This mamish blew my mind. I was really taken by this one line. He says the following. Afilu lemandi omar mishal ben. So if you have this on page 159 on the left column, but it's only one line, so you don't even have to bother. I'll read it to you. He says, Afilu lemandi omar mishal ben. Yesh lomer de chiyuvo eno midin shibud mammon ela begeder mitzvah. Whoa. I'm telling you, I was so excited about this. He says the following, just to translate the words before we try to analyze it. He says that in the case of a wife, we have a shibud mammon. Shibud mammon means a financial obligation. In the case of a ben, even if he's got to sign the check and he has to spend the money for his father, it's because of the mitzvah, not because of a shibud mammon. What does he mean? Kafuf only applies to a wife, but not to a son. Why? Because kafuf means a shibud mammon, a financial obligation. A ben does not have kafuf. He does not have a financial obligation. What do you mean he doesn't have a financial obligation? We're holding now kibbut av mishel ben, and the son has to pay the check. Is that not a financial obligation? Says the Amudi, that's not a financial obligation. It's a mitzvah. What does that mean? Let's say, for example, on Sukkot, I need to take a lulav and an esrog. Is that a financial obligation? For sure it is. An esrog might cost me 1,000 shekel. You remember, I don't know if you saw the movie Ushpizin, that beautiful esrog for 1,000 shekel. Well, I don't say you have to spend that much money on an esrog, but you certainly have financial obligation vis-a-vis the mitzvah of Daled Minan. He says that's the same thing in the case of a ben. Oh, we lost on. All right, anyway. So in the case of a ben, he has a mitzvah of kibbut av. And a mitzvah requires me to shell out money. I don't have an esrog. I got to buy one. I don't have matzah. Right? The prices of matzah have been soaring to the sky. If you want to buy, a hand shmura matzah, forget it. you'll spend who knows what. But that's the nature of the mitzvah. A mitzvah requires me to shell out. On a deeper level, I think what he's saying here is that the question of Heseiba is a reflection of the relationship between, let's say you're back. The relationship between the son and his father, and the relationship between a wife and a husband. If you have a shibud mammon, like in the case of a married woman, that reflects on the relationship between a wife and a husband. The husband can demand those malachos within the framework of ksuba. But the father can't demand the son to spend money. The mitzvah of kibbud av, it's a relationship between the Almighty and the son, meaning the bar chiyuva. He's obligated in the mitzvah of kibbud av like any other mitzvah in the Torah, and that might entail financial expenditures. But that doesn't reflect on the relationship that he has to his father. His father can't demand that, I want your money or your life. He can't put a gun to his head. So within the context of the relationship between a son and a father, there is no shibud mammon. Shibud mammon means I commit myself contractually to owe you and pay you money. There's no such contractual law. The reason why the son is going to have to pay for the steak or for the pizza, whatever he's bringing his father, is because he has to pay for any mitzvah. Torah commands me to do a mitzvah, it's going to cost you money. And there are some mitzvahs you can do for free. You can daven for free. You can teach on Zoom for free. And you don't have to spend any money on that. But many mitzvahs, I don't know if it's most, but many mitzvahs require spending money. And kibbud avim is no exception. But that's not a din of kafir. That's not a reflection of the relationship between a father and his son. It's a general, universal halacha that mitzvahs require money and you have to shell out money. If you don't have any money, that's a different story. I'm just going to get myself a drink. Okay. So, Moshe, let's go back now to the Gemara where we finished off last time. And we had a long discussion about a mikvah and the size of a mikvah. I don't think we have to go through that now. And now we have a different sugya about zugos. Let's see. Oh, here we have a statement of Ravina. And that's where we should pick it up today. Take a look on Daf Kuf Tes Amid Beis. And it's the second to the last line on Kuf Tes Amid Beis. Now, Ravina is trying to answer the following question. We try to avoid even numbers. That's called zugos. Again, the poskim say that doesn't apply today, but back in the day, it was a very serious issue. And the number 4, I don't have to tell you, is an even number. And that's called zugos. And we want to avoid zugos. So the Gemara is going to give an answer that there's no problem of zugos in the case of a mitzvah. if you're doing a mitzvah, and the mitzvah happens to require zugos, like for example, for parshas of tefillin or for minim in the esrog and lulav, so that's already a mitzvah. And the Gemara offers another answer that maybe this halach of leil shimurim, that there's special protection on the night of Pesach. But now Ravina wants to offer another answer. We're assuming that Dalid Kosos is an even number. He says no. Arba kosi tiknu rabbanon derech cherus kol chad v'chad mitzvah b'fnei b'apei nafshi, on the top of Kuf Yud, mitzvah b'apei nafshi. Ravina says the following: there's no such thing as a mitzvah of Dalid Kosos. Don't get hung up with the number 4. The mitzvah is to fulfill each one of the kosos as a separate, independent mitzvah. And that's called kol chad v'chad, each and every one of them is mitzvah b'yapei nafshe, is a mitzvah unto itself. So therefore, you don't integrate all 4 kosos into one entity called 4. There's one, and there's another one, and another one, and another one, but it's not 4. So, for example, if I were to ask you the following question, supposing you only have 3 kosos of yayin on the night of Pesach, can you fulfill 3 mitzvos out of 4, or it's an all or nothing proposition? If you don't have all 4, you don't have anything. What would you say? Based on this Gemara of Ravina.
You've got 3 out of 4.
Correct, because each one is a separate mitzvah. If there was one mitzvah which integrates 4 kosos into one entity, then if you don't have 4, you don't have the mitzvah. But Ravina is not saying that. He's saying just the opposite. Kol chad v'chad mitzvah b'apei nafshe. Each one of the kosos is a separate, independent mitzvah unto itself. So there's no total number of 4. Now, in our Gemara, you'll see that there are 2 words, derech cherus. The Riv takes out those 2 words. He said they don't belong over here. However, we have those words, derech cherus, so we have to make some sense out of those words. So if you have footnote number Chaf Daled, and I always get confused as to whether you have the footnotes or not. We're on Kuf Tesam Beis. Yeah, you have it? So on the left column, on the bottom of your page, he says, Derech Cherus, Hainu Hashem Gal as HaYehudim V'arba L'shon Shel Geula. V'hainu V'otzeisi Eschem Mitzachas Sivlos Mitzrayim. Which means, Shotzia Mitokef HaShibut. That was in Nisan before Yetzias Mitzrayim. When the plague started, then the slavery was alleviated. Then it says V'itzalti eschem mi'avodasam, which is Bittul Avoda, and that was in the month of Tishrei. Then it says Bega'alti eschem, and that's Yetzias Mitzrayim in Nisan. And then it says V'lakachti eschem lili am. That's Kabbalah Satorah in the month of Sivan. So we have Sivan before Yetzias Mitzrayim, we have the Sivan of Yetzias Mitzrayim, and then we have 2 other months here. We have the month of Tishrei, and the month of Sivan. So we have 2 in Nisan, 1 in Sivan, and 1 in Tishrei. Those are the 4 Lashonos of Geula. So the Chachamim established that every Lashon of Geula needs to have a corresponding kos, a cup of wine. Now, each one of these kosos is connected to a different period of time, a different part of the month or a different month. Therefore, he says, I did no same. These are the last line words on the page. Shekol echad yidrosh li atzmo via mitzvah b'fnei atzmo. Since the four Lashonos of Geula reflect on 4 different periods of time, it makes sense that each one of the kosos connected to each one of those, respectively to each one of those Lashonos of Geula is a separate entity, a separate mitzvah. So there's no zugos over here because it's not 4, which is an even number, should be problematic, but rather 1, 1, 1, and 1. Okay. Okay, now where do we go from here? What would you say should be our next project here? Because now it's a long sugi of zugos. Oh. I think we should start here on Kuf Yud Beis. So again, we don't have much time, but I just want to get a little, even a 5-10 minute introduction. And we'll pick this up from Mitzvah Shem tomorrow. But take a look on Kuf Yud Beis Amud Aleph. And we're looking for Vafilu Minatamchui. So do you have the same Surah Sadaf that I have? It goes this way and then it juts out. So from the wider lines, you can count down. Let's count together. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 lines down in the wider lines. And the first word in the line is brire. And if you move your finger across, it'll say afilu min hatamchui. Can you indicate if you have that? Yeah. So we said that tamchui is a soup kitchen. And you have a very poor person who simply doesn't have any money. He can't even buy, food for himself. But he's allowed to collect money for the 4 kosos from the soup kitchen, which is used normally, to feed the poor. Now, what happens in a case where there's not enough money in the chest to support his need for Dalit Kosos? Every tzedakah has a gabbai, and the gabbai tzedakah says, "I'm sorry, my friend, but I don't have the money in the kuppah, to spend on your Daled Kosos. So the halacha is, and here I'm quoting the Rashbam on the Mishnah, he has to sell the shirt off his back to buy Daled Kosos. Yimkar es malbusho kidei liknos yain l'arba kosos. And this we'll see in the Rashbam at the very beginning of our chapter. Let me see if I can find this for a second. Oh. Yeah, the Rashbam writes that afilu hachi im lo nasnu lo gabait staka, the gabait staka didn't give him money for Daled Kosos, yimkar es malbusha. He'll have to sell his garments. I assume he has 2 garments. I don't know. So he'll sell one of them. Oh, Yilva, or he borrows money. Or Yaskir's Atzmo, or he has to hire himself out to get some wages. Bishvil Yain la'arba kosos. So the Gemara says Pshita. I mean, I thought this was a pretty revolutionary halacha, but the Gemara says Pshita. Obviously, if he cannot fulfill his mitzvah, and the Gabbai Tzedakah is not giving him tzedakah money, then for sure he has to sell his malbush. So Gemara answers, Lo nitzrecha elo afilu l'Rabbi Akiva. The Chiddush of our Mishnah is, even according to Rabbi Akiva, he will have to sell his garment. What was the opinion of Rabbi Akiva? The ruling and the principle of Rabbi Akiva was the Omar. Rabbi Akiva maintained that Asay Shabbat Chachol ve'al titztarech lebrios. Let's say you have a minimum amount of food for Shabbos. You want to enhance your Shabbos meals, so you want to buy kishka and cholent and the best fish and so forth and so on, in order to beautify your Shabbos meal. So Rabbi Akiva says, you know what? If you don't have the money for that, and you'll have to come on to tzedakah money or loans or whatever have you, which is called labrios, you have to ask for help. Asay Shabbat Chachol. Eat the same, stale bread and herring that you would eat during the week, during the days of the week. In other words, Rabbi Akiva says in the balance here between beautifying your Shabbos meal and upgrading Oneg Shabbos, as opposed to lihitztarech lebrios, to have to borrow money and ask for a handout in order to beautify your Shabbos meal. Better that your Shabbos meal be chol, be absolutely mundane, like a regular weekday meal, so that you don't have to come on to the brios in order to beg for them and borrow money from them. So according to Rabbi Akiva, if we apply that principle that Rabbi Akiva applies explicitly to Shabbos, let's apply it to Daled Kosos on the night of Pesach. You know what? Better to forfeit the mitzvah of Daled Kosos than to have to come on to other people. Just like Rabbi Akiva says, make your Shabbos into chol, the al titztarech lebrios, so to forfeit the mitzvah of Daled Kosos, the al titztarech lebrios. And that was the Havamina of the Gemara. So why is it different? Why do you have to humiliate yourself in order to achieve Daled Kosos and have to, beg, borrow, and steal, so to speak? Well, you can't steal; it'll be a mitzvah b'avera. But hacha, as far as Daled Kosos, mishum pirsume nisa mode. Where does this concept of pirsume nisa by sheer association come up? Anybody? Where do we have Persume Nisa? It's not the first time in the world that we're getting this concept of Persume Nisa.
For the Hanukkah.
Excellent. Chanukah. What else? It's coming up very short.
Purim.
Purim. Chanukah and Purim is Persume Nisa. These are days on which God delivered us from possible destruction, and therefore we're mefarsing the nes. But there's another case of Persume Nisa that we see here in our Gemara, and that's the night of Pesach. God took us out of Egypt miraculously, and we're going to celebrate that and demonstrate that by drinking Daled Kosos. And that mitzvah, Persume Nisa, is so important. It's on such a high level that even Rabbi Akiva would step aside and he would say, you know what? Beg and borrow. Titztarech lebrios. Sell the garment in your closet in order to be able to be mefarseh the nes, to publicize the miracle. And I want to leave you just with one question, and then B'li Neder will pick this up tomorrow, and that is Pirsum HaNes. I don't get it. At least in Hanukkah, I like the Ner Hanukkah outside. Or in Megillah, I read the Megillah publicly in a shul. That's Pirsum. Pirsum meaning to publicize. But where's the publicity in drinking Daled Kosos? Imagine a person who's all alone on the night of the Seder. Okay, I was lucky during the first round of COVID when we had to be homebound. My wife was with me. So there was some element of Pirsum HaNes on that night of Pesach. But imagine a person an almana who's alone, or a yasam, he's not married and he's, he doesn't have parents, he's not eating in his parents' house. Where's the Pirsum HaNes? He's in a closed room, a locked room, a chederatu. There's no one there to see him drink Daled Kosos. So why is that called Pirsum HaNes? All right, B'li Neder will pick that up tomorrow. So Masechet Sanhedrin, if you'd like to join me at, let's say, in approximately 10 minutes, I just have to relocate. Okay then? Have a great day. Thank you.